The year was 1888, a time of change and turmoil in the United States. Though the Civil War had ended decades earlier, the scars of the conflict still ran deep. The U.S. Army was engaged in one of its last major military campaigns against the remaining Native American resistance in the West. At the same time, tensions with Mexico and border conflicts had made the frontier a dangerous and unpredictable place. Captain William Grayson of the U.S. Cavalry was a seasoned officer, having fought in countless battles across the Great Plains. He had seen firsthand the destruction of war, and though he had once believed in glory, experience had turned him into a hardened realist. As he sat in the dusty outpost of Fort Wallace, Kansas, he reviewed orders from Washington. His regiment was to push further west, securing the Santa Fe Trail from growing threats. Bandits, rogue warriors, and even former Confederate soldiers who had turned to crime were all wreaking havoc along the trade routes. "Another march into hell," muttered Sergeant Daniel Carter, a loyal and battle-worn soldier who had been with Grayson since the Indian Wars. "Seems that way," Grayson replied, folding the orders. "But we do our duty, no matter the cost." The men of the 7th Cavalry prepared to ride at dawn, knowing that ahead of them lay danger, bloodshed, and an uncertain fate. Chapter 2. Blood on the Prairie. The plains stretched endlessly before them, golden grass swaying under a pale sun. The cavalry unit rode in formation, dust rising from their horses' hooves. They had been traveling for days, their supplies dwindling as they searched for the raiders terrorizing settlements along the Kansas border. One afternoon, as they crossed the Cimarron River, a scout rode up in haste. "Captain, there's smoke up ahead," the man reported, his voice tense. "Looks like a settlement's been hit." Grayson spurred his horse forward, his heart pounding. As they crested a hill, the sight before them was grim, a small town reduced to ashes. Corpses lay scattered in the streets, their lifeless forms a testament to the brutality of the attack. "Dear God," Carter whispered. "Who could have done this?" "Bandits, most likely," Grayson said, scanning the wreckage. "Maybe former Confederates who never accepted the war was over. Or worse, outlaws from across the Mexican border." As they moved through the remains of the town, they found survivors, women and children hiding in the cellar of a church. Their stories confirmed Grayson's fears. A group of ruthless raiders, led by a former Confederate officer named Colonel Matthew Slade, had burned the town to the ground. Slade had once been a respected soldier, but after the South's defeat, he had turned to lawlessness, gathering a band of ex-soldiers and criminals to wage his own war against the Union. "We can't let this stand," Carter growled. "We have to track him down." Grayson nodded. "We ride at first light." Chapter 3. The hunt begins. For weeks, the cavalry pursued Slade's men across the plains, following their trail of destruction. The raiders were skilled at covering their tracks, but the Army scouts were patient and relentless. As they neared the Texas border, they encountered another burned settlement. This time, Slade's men had left behind a message, nailed to the church doors. "You took our land, our pride, and our homes. We will take your blood in return." Grayson clenched his jaw. This was more than simple banditry. Slade saw himself as a warrior fighting an endless war. That night, under a star-filled sky, the cavalry devised a plan. If Slade wanted war, they would bring it to him. Chapter 4. The Battle of the Rio Grande. The scouts finally tracked Slade's gang to a canyon near the Rio Grande. The outlaws had built a makeshift fortress, using old Confederate supplies and weapons. They were heavily armed, but the cavalry had the advantage of surprise. At dawn, Grayson gave the order. "Charge." Gunfire erupted as the cavalry stormed the hideout. The battle was fierce. Bullets tore through the air, men fell, and the canyon echoed with the screams of the dying. Grayson fought his way through the chaos, cutting down outlaws as he pushed towards Slade's position. He found the renegade colonel standing atop a rocky ledge, firing his revolver with deadly precision. "You should have let the past die, Slade," Grayson shouted, leveling his rifle. Slade sneered. "The past never dies, Captain. It only waits for men like me to bring it back." He fired, but Grayson was faster. His bullet struck Slade in the chest, sending the outlaw tumbling off the ledge. The battle raged on for another hour, but with their leader dead, the remaining outlaws surrendered or fled. As silence fell over the canyon, Carter approached Grayson. "It's over." Grayson shook his head. "For now." Chapter 5: A Nation Rebuilds. With Slade's gang dismantled, the frontier saw a brief moment of peace. Grayson and his men returned to Fort Wallace, their mission complete. But in his heart, he knew that the war for America's soul was far from over. As he watched the sunset over the vast prairie, he reflected on what they had fought for. Not just land or power, but the idea of a nation moving forward, despite its past. "One battle at a time," he whispered. And so, the wheels of history turned, with men like Grayson shaping the future with steel, sacrifice, and an unyielding spirit.